Hello and welcome to episode 79 of Linux After Dark. I'm Joe.
I'm Chris.
I'm Gary.
And I'm Dalton.
Welcome back, chaps. The question I've got for you today is, what if technology bad? Specifically, social media. It was a bad idea. It was a mistake. What the hell are we going to do about it?
Step away from the burning building. Never go back.
Right. It's very simple what we can do about it. We can just not be on social media or be on nice social media like Mastodon and just block any instances or people that we don't like. That is my personal solution, but we have a societal problem, and I'm convinced that a lot of the polarization that we see in the world, a lot of the problems that we have in the world are caused by social media. And it makes me sometimes think that the internet was just a mistake. But then I wouldn't have this job if it wasn't for the internet, and I wouldn't have friends like you lot if it wasn't for the internet. So it's not all bad. I mean, I realize there's nothing we can really do about it, but let's try and brainstorm some ideas.
It's almost like things aren't black and white, they're actually gray, and there's some good and there's some bad to this.
There is no good to traditional social media that I can see.
Okay, so when you're talking traditional social media, you mean Facebook Meta, Twitter X, and that's about it? MySpace?
Reddit, maybe.
Instagram, all of these other ones, yeah.
Yeah. And TikTok as well. Fuck TikTok.
Okay, real Linux question. Discord?
I don't see that as social media. I don't see Discord, Telegram, WhatsApp. They're chat platforms.
My daughter's school, for example, have put in their newsletter for the first newsletter of the school year, we're now on Twitter. Not calling it X, calling it Twitter. It's like, what is this? First of all, this is a really weird thing to be headlining now. But second of all, why at this moment in its history would you choose to do that and publicize it? It remains, I think Phelim has said this before on Late Night Linux, it remains an official messaging platform for lots of things. I mean, during COVID, those updates were probably the most reliable that you would get. So it has wedged in as the official messaging platform. And that's very annoying. I don't like it at all. But that's where we're at with everything. We tend to be early adopters. I think people that are into technology, because it's a technology-based platforms, we will sign up to Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon, have a look. We might not use all of them a lot, but that's just not the story for most people. I mean, most kids left Facebook when their parents joined, and that's when you know the death rattle is coming. But they have a long lifespan, longer than we think.
But how do we stop silos, polarization, misinformation, that sort of thing? Is it even possible, even with really heavy-handed regulation?
No, because then just another one springs up and it becomes whack-a-mole, right? Like all of the crazies from YouTube moved to Rumble, for example. Or all of the crazies from Twitter, when that was still not crazy enough for them, moved to Locals or other random platforms like that.
Parler.
Yeah, exactly, right? There's always something else where that group of people are going to move to when a platform becomes not what they like. I guess in the same way that we'll move to Mastodon.
It's very difficult as well because you're introducing the idea of censorship, really. And that's problematic because it can be used in the sense that you want it to be, but also against you. And it's a really thorny issue because one version of this conversation would be, well, you know, authorities need to take much tighter control over these platforms and control what's happening on them. But then suddenly you find yourself in a utilitarian state where you're not allowed to say things where, hang on a minute, no, I didn't mean that. Like, we should be allowed to say this, surely. No, not anymore, because the regulations in place for us to be told we're not allowed.
Did you mean totalitarian rather
than utilitarian? I should say that again.
Slightly different.
It's been a very long week. How can I wedge that back in? You might have to cut it out. I can't remember what I said.
No, I'm just leaving all of this in. I don't care.
Okay, well, that's it. I'll just look like a muppet. But it opens the window, doesn't it, to state control in a bad way. And I don't trust that there is a rational arbiter of any form of control of this.
Yeah, you're talking about things like you have to prove your identity. You can't have a pseudonym, for example. You have to have your real name and you have to have government ID to prove that. Like, that's just a dystopian nightmare. That's just not going to work. Because even if you did that for the big platforms, as Gary says, people would just go to other places.
I think it's tricky. I can understand where the impulse for that comes from. You must have seen those documentaries. They've done loads of them now, Meet the Trolls, where people will find a way to track down the person in real life. And it's just astonishing that they're just not the same. Once you put the person that you've insulted in front of them, you say, go on, take this piece of paper and read what you typed. Read it out loud to their face. They're right here. This is directly addressed to them. Read it. They won't. They won't do it. There is a weird feverish anger that people get into when they feel like there's one step removed.
Well, yeah, you only have to look at the metal and glass box that you travel around in. It turns people into maniacs.
Yes, it's true.
But I don't think that that's even the biggest problem with social media, because I think that is solvable. It's very difficult, and it's a very difficult problem to scale. But with decent moderation, you can just ban those people. And yeah, they'll come back and whatnot. And you can potentially IP ban them, and then they'll just use a VPN and all the rest of it. But eventually you make it too hard for them to keep coming back and trolling people and insulting people and stuff. But I just don't see that as the big problem. I mean, it can be a problem if you are the victim of it, don't get me wrong. But it seems to me a bigger problem is the societal one.
Are we talking, say, paid campaigns to misinform or disinform or inject lies into discourse?
I think that's a huge part of it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think people are angry, right? They're angrier.
Well, yeah, and the platforms benefit from people being mad. The more angry you are, the longer you stay on the platform, the more ads you consume, the more money you make them. But is the internet just inherently a place where communities will form? Like-minded individuals will get together. See Linux and open source, for example. We come together for good, at least we think so. Whereas people will come together thinking that they are doing the right thing, like anti-vaxxers, for example, and they will find each other through social media and form these communities, form echo chambers, to the point where they think that running Linux on the desktop is a good idea.
Whoa!
Hang on there.
Oh, shots fired.
What I feel like I've noticed happen in my lifetime is we've gone from communication platforms such as POP3 email and dial-up, where they're slower than the speed of human thought. I had to ask my parents' permission to use the phone line to get a stream of information. I had to wait a long time to download a piece of music. It was less than real time. It was less than the speed of my brain. Now we have supercomputers in our pockets the entire time. We can just pick out and have the world. And I think that's bad. I think the speed at which we can disseminate information far outstrips the speed at which we have the capability to reflect on it. And that's just got worse and worse and worse. And I don't think it's a good thing. And it's the whole touch grass meme. And it's very cringe. And get your Cal Newport banjo out, everyone, and pluck along. But
it was ukulele.
No, sorry. Yeah, I keep, I'll get people emailing in. I know there's a difference between the two. It's fine.
Maybe it was a banjolele.
Banjolele, that's right, with a resonator just to make it even more annoyingly loud. Yeah, I think for me, that's part of it. You don't get a natural recovery moment basically at all. Once you get a smartphone and have plenty of data, you don't have to sit down mindfully at a computer and make it a part of your day. It is an extension of your limbs when you have a smartphone.
I think the other problem is that as humans, we weren't really designed to be in a room with hundreds or thousands of people all thinking the same thing as we're thinking, right? If you think back to before social media, I might have a few friends who like going to play golf, and they're the people I talk to about golf. Or I might have a few mates down the pub who I talk to about politics. But now I'm kind of in this room where I've got thousands of people trying to inform my opinion on something. And that probably doesn't make for healthy, reasoned decision making either.
Well, and also we evolved in small groups. We evolved to be in groups of maybe 100 or so people. And when the group got to be about that size, we kind of split off into a new one. Roughly speaking, not exactly 100, but you know what I mean. Our brain did not evolve to have communication with billions of people at once, or the potential for communication for that many people. And so it's bound to happen that people will just put themselves into silos with about 100 people. Or is that nonsense about 100 people? Are people really getting into massive communities of thousands of people?
Well, they're broadcasting to and having their opinion informed by hundreds of people, right? If you think about the number of people the average person follows on Twitter, it's probably in the hundreds, or Instagram, or whatever other platform it might be. People aren't just following 100 people, are they? They might have 100 friends on there that they follow and regularly interact with, probably less for quite a lot of people. But they're also following celebrities and politicians and other people who are perhaps informing decisions outside of a circle that they'd normally get if they'd just talk to their friends down the pub and watch the 10 o'clock news like we would have done 20, 30 years ago.
I think that's an interesting point, though, because now it isn't media companies, in the case of the US, some controlled by some very unsavory people, who are informing people's opinions. Are we in a better place or a worse place, or is it maybe just the same as it always has been? Same shit, different day?
I think it's just same crap, different people, isn't it? In the same way that there are right-wing and left-wing nuts that own media organisations, there are also right-wing and left-wing nutters who want to inform people's decisions on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. So I suppose it's the scale of it, and I guess the feeling of feeling like you know that person rather than the news. If you're watching CNN, you probably don't feel like you have an interpersonal relationship with the presenter, right? Whereas you might do if you follow them on Instagram and see the pictures of them on the beach or out on the golf course or on a boat or something.
It's easier to generate a parasocial relationship with people now? Is that the problem?
I think it contributes towards it. I don't know if it's the entire problem, but it certainly doesn't help.
I'm reminded of many years ago, I went to a quite interesting place called the Schumacher Institute, which is in the middle of Dartington Hall. And it was a discussion about apples, which seems like a bit of a tangent. But the presenter of this presentation was taking his daughter to school and the kids were just eating sweets. He's like, why are the kids eating so many sweets? There's a vending machine. This is really bad for them. They should have some fruit. He spoke to some of the other parents and they were like, oh, this is quite a good idea. We can sort of prepare fruit and put it into cups and make it ready for them. And they did a whole self-organized kind of FOSS style. We're going to do it ourselves. It's very open. It's for the benefit of the children. We'll have a whip round. And then it was around the time Jamie Oliver was really into his, you can't give the kids turkey Twizzlers and everything's too gold on the plate. The government got scared and the local education authority stole the idea but did it badly. So he was supplying apples that were locally sourced, organic, whatever you want. And the kids were really into it. It didn't cost very much. The school then officially said to him, you cannot do this anymore because the local education authority will be providing this. But it's the same thing. But it wasn't. It was apples with thousands and thousands of miles of carbon to get them to the kids. They were crap. They were brown. They were bad quality. The kids stopped eating them. They'd take a bite and throw them in the bin. And the whole thing started again. And the talk, he'd done that process like 3 times over. And as I'm relaying this story, it reminds me of enshittification. Like, that story is what's playing out again and again and again. You know, it's brilliant that we can contact friends and family all around the world with incredibly low latency voice and video chat in a way that we never could before. Even when I first met my wife, her talking to her family far away was landlines and bad patching. It's suddenly now real-time face-to-face communication. The problem is someone somewhere goes, look at all these people doing things that we can see. How can we slurp that up and turn them into data points and manipulate them? And that's what's happened.
Well, I was about to pivot the question from what if technology bad to what if capitalism bad? Because social media without the capitalism is generally all right. Look at Mastodon, for example. It takes quite a lot of money to run the instances and people chip in. And so there is some money involved, but there's not really any monetary incentive to say certain things, do certain things, act a certain way. Whereas you look at most of the other social platforms, it always turns into a grift. And so people start saying things that they don't truly believe in order to manipulate people into a group and in order to manipulate them into giving them money. I mean, even Facebook groups, right, with stupid memes, you can make money at that if you get enough people engaged with your content, even if it's just ridiculous memes, then Facebook will give you a tiny slice of the ad money, which adds up to some people making a living from that. And like with most things in capitalism, it will inevitably lead to bad people rising to the top and far-right grifters manipulating people to make money. So taking the capitalism out of social media, to me, seems like the solution. And, this isn't supposed to be an advert for Mastodon and the Fediverse, but it sort of is maybe a stealth advert for it.
So we say that, but there have been some pretty big shakeups in small social media lately. Cohost.org is going to shut down at the end of 2024. They're out of money and they're burnt out and they don't want to do it anymore. I think that it is possible that we can give too little money, or people ask for too little money and then they don't actually get to live off of it, and then they don't actually make the social media platform either. So there has to be a medium here, but also building a social media platform cannot be good for your mind. I mean, I was moderating just an open source community for a couple of years, and even that gets you into some crazy shit.
But Cohost wasn't federated, right? It's not part of the Fediverse.
Right, it was made by the Anti-Software Software Club.
Right, and so it was its own silo, its own proprietary thing. No wonder it failed.
They also weren't paying anyone. Oh, okay.
But no one's paying anyone to run a Mastodon instance either, apart from some of the users, or you can run your own. And I feel like it is the solution to the problems that I've outlined here, isn't it?
Yes, basically making money from the platform and not trying to make money off of the content of that platform or the users of that platform does seem like at least a better way forward.
It's interesting you mentioned people working for companies like this, because I tend to be generous towards these people, but when you watch documentaries about the rise of various social media platforms, I distinctly remember one of the early Twitter engineers talking about the excitement he felt when he basically engineered pull to refresh. He was like, this is great. This simple action means you get new stuff. And the whole time he was thinking this was a really innovative way to increase engagement. And his mindset was very much like, this is a positive thing. I'm doing positive software engineering. I've improved the platform. It's what people will want. And then years later, he's reflecting back and being like, I basically created a digital addiction thing, like when mice go back for cocaine to prove the addiction complex in the human brain. I've put that in people's thumbs. That's what I've done. And I don't like that I've done that.
Yeah, and the people who wrote the algorithms that would drive engagement through pissing people off. They thought maybe they were doing the right thing in some twisted way, perhaps, but it's clear that they weren't doing a good thing.
Yeah, they must have sat down with balance sheets and realized the bad things drove engagement. And that's a choice, ultimately. Like that's a concrete choice that has been followed. And if you go from one of these companies all the way from startup to big bucks, I don't think you see it as much as maybe people who aren't as close to it do. And it must eventually get to the point where you think, I've had enough, or the platform collapses. But that's always going to be the thing, isn't it? It's always the difficulty that there's this constant supposed need and desire for growth. And at certain points, people with more money are going to come and offer the possibility of growth, but that will be the underlying strategy, even if they couch it in much more technical or engineered terms.
Yeah, even if you start out with really good ideals in mind, someone's going to come along without that strong of ideals who wants to make more money than you do.
Don't be evil. I mean, I don't know how better to say it. That is literally the mantra of Google from the beginning. And I feel like it's a natural pattern that those ideals just eventually will get lost, I think.
Also, I want to say that I misspoke. Cohost is no longer paying people. It seems like from their wording that they were paying people. Apologies if I put the wrong idea in anyone's head.
So to return to my original question, what the hell are we going to do about this? Because I remember when Mastodon came out, I was a bit skeptical. Well, I was very skeptical about it. And then even when a Bond villain bought Twitter, I still hung around there. and was like, no, I like the algorithmic stuff and all the rest of it. And it was only when he like actually turned out to be the proper Bond villain that he is now that I moved off to Mastodon. And I'm quite a technical open source person. What hope have we got of moving people away from the likes of Twitter and Instagram onto the Fediverse? It's surely a pipe dream.
There is the network effect, though. So if we are there, and I say we as in all of you because I'm not getting an account, then other people will follow the people who they like. And if that ultimately ends up with people getting into smaller groups or more local groups where they're able to actually go and see each other in person and reason out their differences, that's probably a good thing.
I think that Meta making Threads somewhat compatible with the Fediverse is good. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's terrible, and oh, Facebook and Meta is this evil company and we should just block them. But I don't agree with that. I think it's good to get more normal people at least somewhat adjacent to the Fediverse.
So they can see what content is there and what they might be missing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just can't see it. Trying to get someone who is outside of the technology circle to even switch to a different chat platform is nigh on impossible. See the 8 chat platforms I have pinned in my dock right now as an example of that. So I think getting them to move off of a social network where they've 10, 20 more years of history and friends built up and photos stored and everything else just really, really doesn't feel like something that's going to happen anytime soon.
So you're telling me this is a lost cause and that it's only going to get worse, and the polarization and literal 2 different realities existing side by side or on top of each other cannot be fixed?
I think the most we can do is carry the 100 people we care about wherever it is we go. Or at least try and keep them from going too deep.
Or hope that the 100 people you care about are sensible enough to see through it and just run away. I haven't got to that point yet, but maybe someday they will.
Well, on that hopeful bombshell, we should probably get out of here then. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, but until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Chris.
I've been Gary.
I've been Dalton.
See you later.